Good morning. Good to see everyone this morning. We'll turn to number 580. 580. After this, we'll ask Austin to lead us in opening prayer. 580. This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears all nature sings, and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world, I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, his hand the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world. The birds their carols raise, the morning light, the lily white, declare their Maker's praise. This is my Father's world. He shines in all that's fair. In the rustling grass I hear him pass. He speaks to me everywhere. This is my Father's world. Oh, let me ne'er forget that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world. The battle is not done. Jesus who died shall be satisfied, and earth and heaven be one.
Heavenly Father, we come before you. Thank you for another week, and thank you for this first day of the week, and we thank you for those who could be here this morning, and pray for those who could not be here. Father, we just ask that you be with us as we go through our study and this morning, and pray that Matthew, and just pray that we're open and receptive to the word that you have given us this evening.
Amen. Matthew chapter 20. Not much is said about Jesus' ministry in Perea. It's fairly brief in what we have been given as compared to his ministry in Galilee, even though Perea lasted right around 6 months. What we're going to find in the remaining chapters of Matthew is the last week of Jesus' life. Many details given as to what occurred during that week, although Wednesday of that week finds little mention. Jesus has spent the last 3 years plus preparing his disciples for his departure in one way or another, and for their ambassadorship. They still have no clue as to who Jesus really is, or what he's been trying to make of them, what he's trying to prepare them for, which is evident after his death and his resurrection. He had to go and find them and round them up. Again, they just kind of, well, that's it, nothing's going to happen, and went back to work. So he spent 40 days before his ascension preparing them for all that he had taught them and for what they were about to do. The purpose of his teachings before ascending to the right hand of the Father on high. And it's only when they see him ascending into the cloud, when they hear the words of the men clothed in white apparel, that things finally begin to click. But now Jesus must get more open with them concerning his death and his leaving. As he prepares them for leaving Perea and traveling to Jerusalem, and this will be his final journey to the Jewish capital. So he's about to fill his disciples with apprehension concerning his journey. Prophetically, Jesus will inform them of what is going to occur in this coming week. Something that he's been telling them in a roundabout way since his ministry began. The kingdom of God that Jesus has been teaching them is about to appear. In verse 17, Matthew continues, "Now Jesus, going up to Jerusalem, took the 12 disciples aside on the road and said to them, 'Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and to the scribes. They will condemn him to death, deliver him to the Gentiles to mock and to scourge and to crucify. And the third day he will rise again.' Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. He said to her, 'What do you wish?' She said to him, 'Grant that these 2 sons of mine may sit, one on your right hand and the other on the left, in your kingdom.' But Jesus answered and said, 'You do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink? Be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?' They said to him, 'We are able.' So he said to them, 'You will indeed drink my cup, be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with, but to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it is prepared by my Father.' And when the 10 heard it, they were greatly displeased with the 2 brothers. But Jesus called them to himself and said, 'You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. Those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. Whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, to give his life a ransom for many. Now as they went out of Jericho, a great multitude followed him. Behold, 2 blind men sitting by the road. When they heard that Jesus was passing out of Jericho, or passing by, cried out, saying, 'Have mercy on us, O Lord, Son of David.' Then the multitude warned them that they should be quiet. But they cried out all the more, saying, 'Have mercy on us, O Lord, Son of David.' So Jesus stood still and called them and said, 'What do you want me to do for you?' They said to him, 'Lord, that our eyes may be opened.' So Jesus had compassion, touched their eyes, and immediately their eyes received sight, and they followed him." Now the expression we find here concerning Jesus, he was about to go up to Jerusalem, finds many commentators divided as to what Matthew is saying here. Now, usually when a text speaks about going up or going down, it's referring to geological elevation. Okay? Now, Mark says they were on the road going up to Jerusalem. Mark chapter 10 and verse 32. Whether they're still in Perea or on the road about to ascend up to Jerusalem, the result is the same. The journey up to Jerusalem did not begin until they reached Jericho. Jericho is about 1,000 feet below sea level. where Jerusalem is 2,600 feet above sea level. So they got some climbing to do from Jericho, 15 miles up to Jerusalem. So Jesus and his disciples had not yet crossed the Jordan River. So it appears that Jesus, upon concluding his blessings with the little children, began to depart, most likely heading toward Jerusalem, which is why we find the rich young ruler running up to him to catch him before he left the area. Mark gives us some details about this incident that are quite revealing in chapter 10, verse 33. And Jesus went before them, and they were amazed. And as they followed, they were afraid. So it appears from Mark's account that Jesus was urgent to get to Jerusalem. He marched out ahead of his disciples, almost as if they had trouble keeping up with him. He was moving so quickly, which is what caused their amazement and at the same time anxiousness. However, before this determined journey to Jerusalem, Jesus, during his Perean ministry, made a quick trip to Bethany, as recorded in John chapter 11. A certain man lay sick, named Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha. His sisters had sent for Jesus to come and heal Lazarus, but he delayed. He delayed for the purpose he was going to allow Lazarus to die, so that God could get the glory in bringing him back alive. Jesus waited 2 days, then proceeded to Bethany, and on the way his disciples thought that Jesus was talking to them about Lazarus just sleeping off his sickness. And they said, well, that's good, that's good. So Jesus spoke to them plainly to let them know, no, he is dead. And that he's glad that he was not there, so that he could perform this miracle for their sakes, that they would believe. Verse 13 to 15 of John 11. It's also here that when Jesus saw the sisters of Lazarus weeping, his compassion for them overcame him and he wept. Verse 35. Shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. Going to the grave, Jesus caused Lazarus to come back alive, causing many of the Jews in the area to believe on him, which in turn caused the Pharisees to hate him all the more, as well as they now hate Lazarus and are plotting to murder him. So Jesus and his disciples returned back to Perea. Now we're a week away from the Passover. And Jesus is headed that way to Jerusalem. Along the way, he speaks to his disciples, tells them what's going to happen in Jerusalem, that the chief priests and the scribes are going to betray him and condemn him to death. They're going to deliver him to the Gentiles, in other words, to the Romans, who will mock him, scourge him, and crucify him. But he will rise again on the third day, verse 19. Like it was in all other cases, when Jesus told them about his eventual demise, the apostles did not understand what he was saying. Matthew 17:23, Mark 9:32, and Luke 9:45. Now the wife of Zebedee the mother of James and John, Jesus' aunt, whose name is Salome, came to him and asked a favor of her nephew. Using this kinship as leverage, possibly, she asks a certain thing of Jesus, the text tells us. To which Jesus replies, "What is your wish?" Of course, knowing exactly what she desires, he wants her to commit herself first by asking him exactly what she's looking for. Now, back in chapter 9, verse 28, Jesus had told the 12 that they would sit on 12 thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, while that was a great honor, possibly they're still thinking about that. Okay, we're already going to be sitting on 12 thrones. We're going to be judges. What greater honor would it be for James and John to sit on either side of Jesus? After all, they were cousins. They would have the most honored positions of all the 12 if he granted that. But what's Jesus' reply? You don't know, you don't understand what it is that you're asking for. You know, they're still thinking like the average Jew. That upon arriving to Jerusalem, Jesus is going to claim his rightful place as the King of the Jews. He's going to establish his kingdom. He's going to rid the world of the Romans and make Judea the great nation it once was. That's what they've been looking for in the Messiah. So for the last 3+ years, Jesus has been teaching them on a spiritual plane, while the entire time their minds have been stuck in the physical. His kingship, his reign as king, his kingdom was not going to be the type that they're thinking of. If Jesus were to grant such a request as this, then he would have been denying everything God had done over the past 4,000 years to prepare for this particular time. They're thinking of a worldly kingdom. Type of kingdom that they want displaced, removed. And the Roman Empire, like most empires, had been built on the same parameters of favor, solicitations, unwholesome conditions, which caused them to hate the Romans. Yet, you're wanting to be like the Romans? So Jesus then asked them the question, are you able to drink of the cup that I am about to drink? You know, had they not read Isaiah 53? Isaiah 53, the suffering servant. Well, most likely they had, but they refused to accept its reference to Jesus, to their king. That couldn't possibly be talking about the Messiah. To drink of a cup means to experience its contents. And looking at it from the point of view of being poured out into a cup, there must be someone doing the pouring. Therefore, the cup represents the portion assigned, and God is the one doing the pouring, doing the assigning. So Jesus' cup of suffering was assigned to him by God. Matthew 26, verse 39 to 41. In Matthew chapter 10, verse 38 and following, Jesus would add the baptism wherewith he is baptized with, just as Matthew does here, alluding to the overwhelming, baptism is an overwhelming of suffering to which he would be immersed in. So what they failed to realize is that the only way to gain a throne in the kingdom was the same way that Jesus would gain a throne, through the cross. He's asking them, are they willing to be crucified like he is? Were they really willing to take that same route in order to sit on either side of him? Now, there's no doubt that one day they absolutely would be baptized with the suffering for his cause. But still having no clue as to what he's talking about, they quickly answer. We're able. Yep. We're willing. We're able. Bring it on. I mean, would not Peter, during this week, inform Jesus that even if everybody else denies you, I never will? Yet when the time came to prove himself, he failed, didn't he? Denying Jesus 3 times in one night, in just a few short hours. So what we find here is their overconfidence, not their insincerity, is what they are guilty of. Overconfidence, saying, yes, we are able, which they don't even have a clue as to what they're agreeing to. Possibly the suffering that they're thinking about that Jesus is speaking of have to do with some great battle against the Romans that would help establish the Messianic kingdom. And they've already been promised that they're going to sit on 12 thrones to judge the tribes of Israel, so that means that we're going to live through the suffering, through the battles. So yeah, we're ready, we're able. Verse 23, Jesus answers them with the prophecy. My cup indeed you will drink, and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. Rather than scolding them like they deserved, instead Jesus agrees with them that they will share his cup, as with multitudes of others. As we read in the book of John, Revelation chapter 6, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God, for the testimony which they held. Verse 9. Now, not everyone is going to suffer the same demise as Jesus did. Not everyone's going to be crucified. But they will suffer, one way or another. And there are many ways that Christians suffered in the first century, up into the third century. Jesus says, but to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give. Well, is he not God? Can he not change? God the Father has already decided the matter. Back in eternity, before anything was created, he established the plan, and it was set. Jesus had no authority to change it. Since the Godhead is unified in their will, in their purpose, in their counsel, the decision was made a long time ago as to how things would be. Ephesians 1, verse 4 through 10. The only way anyone is able to qualify for the honor that they are seeking is by worthy service to the King and our fellow man. That's what Jesus has been trying to teach these disciples. In verse 24, we find what is often common among men: being upset with others for doing what they would have done. But they got beat to it. So the 10 disciples become indignant with James and John for what they saw as an unfair advantage, being cousins of the Lord. You're thinking, you're going to get special benefits, when they all coveted the same thing. It's just that these two brothers had their mother to speak on their behalf, thinking Jesus might be more prone to listen to his aunt than to them. The honor that these two would eventually receive anybody remember what their honor was? James would be the first apostle to be killed. He'd be martyred. And when Herod saw it pleased the people, what did he want to do? He went after Peter. Threw him in prison. But God had released him before he could be. And then John is going to suffer the longest, even though he was the last apostle to live. But he suffered many various things. So what's interesting about this incident is it's true to life. Proving that the Bible is not a work of fiction. In verse 25, rather than admonish them as they deserve, Jesus instead chooses to repeat the concepts of true discipleship. Okay, I've been doing this for 3 years, but I'm going to do it again. And he's going to have to do it again during those 40 days. The only way to gain honors in the kingdom is to give one's life for Christ. Or give your life to Him and in service to others, as we've already mentioned. Greatness in the kingdom is not measured by the number of people we're able to serve, whether it's Rome itself or other governments, or the hierarchy of the Catholics, the Episcopals, the Methodists, and other such churches. Even the Mormons have hierarchy as well. That's not the way to achieve greatness in the kingdom. In fact, God despises such structures as those. Why would He despise those type of structures? Those type of organizations? Mm-hmm.
It's honoring men rather than God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think those two are pretty good. Yeah. Which, goes against everything Jesus has been teaching so far. Humbleness, being humble. Well, those type of things do not bring about humility. Especially when you have some of these people, you got to kiss the ring and give them, it's like the Pharisees giving them the best seats in the house. I know when I was working in Dubuque, Iowa, which the diocese was located there for that area. Had the Archbishop living there and all these Catholic churches, and he'd be in a restaurant waiting to get seated, and in comes a Catholic priest, and everybody runs to give him his special place. He doesn't have to wait, And it was that way all the time, everywhere. Sometimes I felt like wearing a collar, but so verse 26 and 27, whosoever would be great or chief among you, Jesus says, let him be your servant, let him be your slave. And what we find in these two verses is two different Greek words for the English word servant. Depends on the translation. The New King James says servant and then slave. Some say servant twice. But verse 26 is diakonos, and verse 27 is doulos. Now it's the first, diakonos, that is referring to a slave. The second one is a freedman, but bound to his owner to serve in whatever capacity he is needed. So we must ask ourselves, by trying to keep the context, what would first century Christians, first century Jews understand? How would they understand Jesus' meaning here by using these two different words? And really, in short, it didn't really matter whether you were a slave or a freedman. You were still expected to do whatever the master wanted you to do, whatever his will was. Jesus is saying here, in the kingdom, there's not going to be any ringside seats for honored spectators. All there's going to be is places of service beside the king, who is busy washing feet, who is dying for sinners, who is mediating for all. John 13, verse 12 to 17. Romans 8, verse 29. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 21 and following. And like he has said no less than 2 times before, verse 28, whoever would be greater first must be last. That's basically what he's saying. Now, having arrived at Jericho, they spend the night, then they depart and begin their uphill climb to Jerusalem. A great multitude is following Jesus. But it's going to be a multitude that's not going to remain loyal. They'll gradually thin out as things begin to get worse for Jesus. Leaving the city, Jesus passes 2 blind men. Luke seems to locate this particular incident as Jesus drew near to Jericho, not as he was departing. Chapter 18, verse 35. And this, of course, has caused a problem in the eyes of, or a supposed problem with the critics, because two accounts say he was leaving Jericho, and one says they were arriving at Jericho. Well, how do we work those things out? Because we know there's no contradictions. Well, reading the 3 different accounts, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. As Luke is speaking of Jesus drawing near, he says, a blind man is sitting on the side of the road. Jesus passes him by. He doesn't notice. But hearing the multitude, the crowds passing by, well, that's a little bit more noisier with a bunch of people, and he asks what's happening. Matthew and Mark say Jesus is leaving, and 2 blind men cry out to Jesus for help. Of course, Matthew says there's 2, Mark and Luke says there's 1. Most likely, Mark and Luke are focused on the one who spoke out the most. Jesus and his disciples and many others spent the night in Jericho because it was the Sabbath before traveling on to Jerusalem. So it's very possible that the blind man that Luke is talking about, as you're coming into Jericho, relocated to the west side of the city. Knowing, okay, I tried to catch people as they were coming in, now I'm going to catch people as they go out. Because they're going to be leaving the next day to go to Jerusalem for the Passover at the end of this coming week. The 2 blind men, Matthew says, spoke out Jesus stands still. What do you want me to do for you? They'd asked him for an unspecified mercy. Have mercy on us. So Jesus says, okay, get specific. What exactly do you want me to do? Kind of like he did with James and John's mother. That our eyes may be opened. Nothing more, nothing less. We just want our eyesight. Because that will help us lead a more normal life, more fulfilling life. We'll be able to get work. We won't have to sit out here on the side of the road begging. So Jesus' reaction was unlike that of the crowd, of the multitude, who kept telling these two, shut up, just be quiet, don't say anything. They were rebuking them. Jesus had compassion on them. Returned back to them, touching their eyes, and immediately their eyesight came to them. Being unable in the past to travel to Jerusalem, unless somebody helped them there for the feast days, they're now ready, willing, and able to do that. They followed Jesus. Luke says they glorified God, which then caused the multitude to glorify God. Here the multitude changes from rebuking these two, from saying anything, to now glorifying God that they have their eyesight. This is the last record of Jesus' public ministry. Immediately they received their sight and followed him. They had stayed in Jericho because it was the Sabbath. Now Jesus is going to begin his final week. Chapter 21 begins on Sunday, the first day of the week. Any questions? Nope. All righty. Thank you.